He got a job picking up the flashbacks.
You did really?
Talks with other people.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to welcome you to the October 2nd, 2019 Democracy Day public hearing with Kent City Council. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Amrhein?
Here.
Mr. DeLeone?
Here.
Mr. Ferrara?
Here.
Mr. Kuhar?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg? Here. Ms. Shaffer? Mr. Sidoti?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Ms. Wallach?
That's why I understand Ms. Wallach called and she's going to be late because she's still in a class. So I need a motion to,
Oh, move to excuse.
is there a second? Ms. Wallach?
Second.
Second. Any question, discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. In accordance with Article 12, Section 12.05 of the city charter, notice was hereby given that the Kent City Council was conducting a public hearing to examine the impact on the city, state, and national political influence resulting from campaign contributions by corporate entities. We ask when the clerk calls your name, come to the podium, speak clearly into the mic, and give us your name and address for the minutes, and you will have 5 minutes to share your concern. If possible, leave your written concerns with the clerk for the record. Thank you. Who's first?
Debbie Silverstein.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Silverstein. I live at 1072 Aaron Drive in Kent, Ohio. And I'll bet you'll never guess what I'm going to talk about. Over 1 million Americans have had to turn to GoFundMe to raise money for needed surgeries, chemotherapy, medications, and more. It's been reported that 41% of campaigns on crowdfunding sites are for medical bills, but that only 11% of them meet their goals. In the truly American free market way, families have to market themselves so that potential donors will find them worthy of living. And those who don't have access to the tools to crowdfund suffer and die in silence. As Dr. Margaret Flowers recently wrote, there seems to be a lack of awareness in the United States about how much our healthcare system is an aberration. We tolerate levels of injustice that would be unthinkable in other advanced nations. Let me be clear, this is not normal. In no other industrialized nation in the world do people have to beg strangers for money so they or a loved one can live. It takes a special kind of cruelty to accept this and think it's okay. The fact should disgust each and every one of us enough to inspire action to turn our healthcare system away from the Wall Street markets and profiteers and create a system that's truly just, truly humane, and that serves the needs of the people. Protecting or tweaking the status quo isn't enough because the status quo is woefully inadequate. We cannot be satisfied simply protecting a system where people die because they can't afford care and people lose their homes and life savings because they have an accident or get sick, or they're left out completely. Our mission is one of moral urgency. We must demand a healthcare system that is truly universal, that is equitable, where services and resources are allocated according to the needs of the people, and financing is public through progressive taxation. We must demand a system that is transparent, provides for public participation at all levels, and is accountable directly to the people it serves, not the Wall Street investors, as our current system is. America must fund people's needs, not corporate greed. Rise up. I call on the Kent City Council to pass a resolution in support of the Medicare for All Act of 2019, H.R. 1384, and the Ohio Health Plan, House Bill 292, which was introduced into the Ohio House this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call it on, young lady in the back, were you going to address us under the public? No. All right, sir, were you going to address the public hearing? All right. Next.
Swanhild Vanita.
Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Swanhild Benida, and I live at 401
Oakwood Drive in Kent.
Thank you.
Good evening.
You can turn it down if you want. Yeah, there you go.
Like that?
Now you're a
Okay.
star.
All right.
Ready for your close-up.
This is from a recent article in the Record Courier. Defenders of nuke bailout lie in new ad. A new TV commercial from the defenders of the House bill consumer bailout of Ohio's 2 nuclear power plants includes an outright lie. The 30-second spot that began airing Thursday, entitled Lights Out Ohio, makes the false assertion that Chinese companies are buying Ohio power plants. Now, because of deregulation, foreign entities, including China, are pouring into Ohio, buying power plants, and infiltrating our power grid, the commercial says. Despite repeated requests, Ohioans for Energy Security, the group opposing a petition drive to place a referendum on the ballot in November 2020 to repeal the law, could provide no documentation supporting its ad. Group spokesman Carlo Laparo provided dozens of articles from corporate financing websites about the government-owned Industrial and Commercial Bank of China and natural gas-fired power plants in Ohio. But all the articles concerned loans and financing it provided, not ownership interests. Chinese banks are heavily financing these projects. That's a fair topic of discussion, he said. These are not simple loans. These are substantial funders. Laparo declined to reveal the cost of the statewide commercial buy and who is funding his group. A new commercial continues a communist-tinged theme from Ohioans for Energy Security, claiming that Chinese interests are attempting to take over Ohio's electricity generation and close Akron-based First Energy Solutions, pair of nuclear power plants along Lake Erie. Again, the group can only point to Chinese loans to gas power plants, not ownership stakes. First Energy, the parent of bankrupt First Energy Solutions, also has loans from a Chinese bank. The bank was among multiple lenders involved in financing 3 of Ohio's 4 natural gas-fired power plants. A group opposed to House Bill 6, Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts, is working to obtain the valid signature of 265,774 registered voters by October 21st to place a referendum before voters on the November 2020 ballot. Signed into law by Governor Mike DeWine, House Bill 6 will impose an 85-cent monthly charge on residential electricity bills to generate $150 million a year to subsidize the Lake Erie plants owned by First Energy Solutions. If the referendum makes the 2020 ballot, the law will not take effect unless voters approve it. The bankrupt company threatened to close the plant starting June 30th without a subsidy and will shut them down if the referendum qualifies for the ballot, Laparo said earlier. Gene Pierce, spokesman for Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts, said of the opposition's new TV commercial, "It's just as misleading and untruthful as before. It's a sign of desperation. They have $1 billion coming from someone else's pocket, and they will do everything they can, ignoring the truth, to get that money." Ohioans for Energy Security is a so-called dark money group and is not required to disclose its donors and the amounts they give. Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts Eventually, we'll have to disclose its spending and donors. Peers said they do not include Chinese interests. Owners of natural gas-fired power plants have signaled they are funding the referendum effort, while allies of First Energy Solutions apparently are bankrolling the TV commercials. Supporters contend the law is necessary to preserve thousands of jobs at Davis-Besse and Perry nuclear power plants and retain Ohio's largest and cleanest source of electrical energy. First Energy Solutions also is attempting to overturn the referendum bid before the Ohio Supreme Court, arguing House Bill 6 imposed a tax that is not subject to repeal at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Bill Wyland.
Need your name and address for the record, please.
Bill Wyland, 867 Stonewater Drive in Kent.
It's down
Step
low,
bottom,
halfway
right,
down.
right there.
Nope, nope,
Lower,
not
lower,
lower.
lower.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
One way will loosen it and
We don't, I
then, it's a
couldn't get it.
trick, really. I think it's, huh, it's not turning? Not turning. Well, you can
You
take
can
the
take the mic
microphone
off,
out,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
take it right out and hold it in your hand.
No, clip, just pop it right out, grab it. The mic itself, just grab the mic.
Just pick it up.
There you go. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Start my time over.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to start until you say something.
I want to focus on the global warming
Name and
issue.
address.
Name and address. Right. Oh, you did.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Bill Wyland,
yeah, we got you.
Kent,
Starting
Ohio.
You was worried about your
Start them
microphone.
You're
again.
good.
Okay. Go. I want to focus on the global warming issue because of how it relates to corporate personhood and money as speech, especially in connection with elections. Fortunately, we have some highly regarded authors who present valid and reliable information to help us understand the impact of money in politics, or should I say more accurately, the impact of dark money on elections. Jane Mayer, in her well-documented book by the same title, focuses in on Charles and David Koch, the enormously rich proprietors of an oil company, and how they use their money to buy their way to political power. Through their funding of organizations such as Americans for Prosperity and American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, and other think tanks, they promote their money interests, most notably in elections. And since the Supreme Court decided that money is a form of speech, they and other plutocrats can spend as much money for their self-interests and thereby essentially hijacking American democracy. One of the most notable crusades of recent years is the fight to prevent action against climate change. Why? Because their big money comes from fossil fuel production. Bill McKibben, in his new book, Falter, has the human game begun to play itself out, also documents Koch's lavish spending in elections, especially at the state level, to ensure their business and personal interests were supported. For example, why would the EPA loosen federal rules on methane by allowing oil and gas industries to set their own rules when it comes to preventing this powerful greenhouse gas from leaking out of new drilling wells? Obama's tough restrictions on methane are being reduced. This is another Trump giveaway to the gas and oil companies by reducing their costs. McKibben writes that Exxon's scientists 40 years ago, in 1978, reported that there is general scientific agreement that the release of CO2 gases from the burning of fossil fuels is influencing the global climate. This was the beginning of one of the most consequential big cover-ups in human history. The Exxon Corporation, in partnership with the other major oil, gas, and coal industries, coordinated a campaign of disinformation and lies. McKibben draws the conclusion that, quote, "We're on a bleak moment in human history. We'll either confront that bleakness or watch the civilization our forebears built slip away." By the way, there's a new book on the Koch brothers' moneyed influence in politics with their huge amounts of money. Kochland, the secret history of Koch Industries and corporate power in America. Margaret Talbot of the New Yorker, in her review of the book, concluded, quote, "The Koch machine bought its way into Congress and turned climate change denial into an unchallengeable Republican talking point." Let's go to the Northeast Ohio region. In a recent report by the Union of Concerned Scientists, it was mentioned that global warming has brought more intense storms, more precipitation to Cleveland and other parts of the Midwest. Various pieces of evidence indicate that the Great Lakes are warming. For example, the ice season has started later and ended earlier. Scientists expect more intense storms to occur in the Midwest and more precipitation to fall in winter and spring. What do we do about the Citizen United ruling that money is speech, and therefore those with lots of money have more power, much more power and influence in politics and elections? The wealthy and corporations are always going to have influence in elections, one way or the other. We need to focus on empowering average people by reinvigorating and expanding the public financing system for campaigns, both at the state and federal levels. At the local level, Kent City's council approved the Paris Agreement. Thank you. The realization is that we, the people, can publicly disapprove of Trump's irrational and self-serving decision and make a small step in the right direction of sustainability. Hopefully, the Sustainability Commission's Climate Action Plan Committee will fulfill its responsibility soon and move us forward. Back to the bigger picture, we need to get the We the People 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution passed by getting 2/3 of the House of Representatives to approve it. Thank you, Tim Ryan, for getting on board. But we need more from Ohio to serve as a model for the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you leave your written statement?
I have it.
Oh, you have it?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next.
Judy Nelson.
Name and address for the record, please.
Okay, Judy Nelson, 330 Whetstone Drive, Kent. Okay, in June of this year, like I'm kind of weird here. Okay, in June of this year, many communities in Northeast Ohio celebrated the 50-year anniversary of the burning of the Cuyahoga River. Even a torrential downpour did not prevent our Kent community from coming together to recognize the importance of the changes that had occurred along the whole Cuyahoga River watershed as a result of the attention its burning received. The Federal Clean Water Act and our yearly celebration of the earth were both born from this new awareness that was generated. We all know water cannot burn. So what was the cause of the fire? Industrial waste and debris. The prosperity that industry had brought to the region was also the culprit in the degradation of the river and the quality of the water. Fast forward 50 years. We continue to recognize the importance of protecting our environment, right? It seems we may need a refresher course. Under the guise of promoting economic growth and development, federal regulations meant to protect our air, water, health, and safety are being attacked and dismantled. This implies that economic prosperity and a clean, healthy environment cannot coexist. The reality is that the destruction of our environment puts economic prosperity and human existence at grave risk. So what does this have to do with money and politics? We are all aware of the saying, follow the money, as it relates to reasons for changes in the status quo. Whose money is behind the deregulation frenzy of the current administration? Yours? Mine? Polls consistently show that Americans want not only a healthy economy, but also want to have a government that protects them. to have and enforce regulations to ensure that they are not harmed for the sake of corporate profits. I believe the recent controversy over emission standards is just one example of corporate profits trumping the public interest. The auto industry, through innovation and technology, has been rising to the challenge of meeting the stricter standards that California has put in place. This is a win-win for the industry and for air quality. So who would profit from more lax standards? The oil and gas industry, perhaps? Follow the money. This industry clearly has extensive financial influence in our democracy. Should we let their interests usurp our rights to clean air? Democracy, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. People, not corporations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Jackie Peck.
Jackie, name and address.
Address,
I'm-
correct? Okay,
That's why I make the big bucks.
that's good. Jackie Peck, 907 High Ridge Lane, Kent. Good evening. I am pleased to be here as a board member of the Kent League of Women Voters and speaking on behalf of our membership, talking this evening about money in politics. As members of the Kent League, we are also members of the League of Women Voters of Ohio and the League of Women Voters of the United States, which allows us to work from a grassroots perspective at all levels of government. Many of you may know the League as an association that supports voting rights, voter access and education, and efficient and economical government. We are also a nonpartisan organization that works on selected issues, carefully studying pros and cons, educating our membership, and engaging in dialogue on those issues so that we can come to a consensus to develop a position that forms the basis for our lobbying and advocacy. Since our League of Women Voters United States Convention in 1972, we have had a position on campaign finance reform. We have acted strongly and frequently to apply our League principles of supporting an open and representative government to our political campaigns. Most recently, the League of Women Voters US did a study in 2016 that resulted in a revised position that can be summarized as follows. Money in politics. Campaign finance regulation should enhance political equality for all citizens, ensure transparency, protect representative democracy from distortion by big money, and combat corruption and undue influence in government. The League believes that campaign spending must be restricted but not banned. The League supports public financing, full disclosure, abolishing super PACs, and creating an effective enforcement agency. I have left some copies of the full League position with the clerk tonight. Transparency and disclosure are the key words in that position. Ohio voters should be able to follow the money. For example, the aggressive campaigning and scare tactics, so nicely outlined by Swanee, that are currently facing us by dark money groups that are determined to stop a vote on HB 6 have misled voters, thus highlighting the urgent need to close this loophole in Ohio's campaign finance laws. Disclosure and transparency are important for three particular reasons. One, voters need to be able to determine the source of election information. We need to know who's speaking. Is it the Farm Bureau? Big Pharma? Disclosure gives voters the information to make informed election decisions. Two, voters need to be able to determine when improper pressure and/or special treatment is given to candidates. By exposing large contributions and expenditures, disclosure deters corruption and avoids even the appearance of corruption. And 3, voters need to be able to determine if campaign finance law has been violated. For this reason, disclosure is necessary. I, with all the other members of the Kent League, stand with the League of Women Voters of Ohio in calling for the Ohio General Assembly to bring Ohio's finance laws up to date before the 2020 election cycle. Voters need to know who is funding political advertisements. Without disclosure, big pocket expenditures remain dark money that destroys the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Lee Brooker.
Name and address for the record. Thank you.
I am Lee Brooker, 814 Hudson Road in Kent. I'd like to read into the record an article from by Donald Shaw for Sludge from March 20th of this year. Headline being, "Government Contractors Are Making Political Contributions Despite Long-Standing Ban." And I should be able to read it within 5 minutes if I speak quickly. In the 2018 election cycle, at least 7 companies that had active contracts with the federal government made donations to PACs, despite such contributions being illegal under the Federal Election Campaign Act. Recent post-general disclosures filed with the Federal Election Commission revealed at least 2 political contributions from contractors, and several other such contributions were identified by campaign finance watchdog group Campaign Legal Center and by Money and Politics reporters earlier in 2018. Louisiana-based Alpha Marine Services, which has active contracts with the Department of Defense worth more than $80 million, gave $100,000 to a super PAC aligned with Republican House leadership, the Congressional Leadership Fund, in June 2018. Also giving to the Congressional Leadership Fund was multinational conglomerate 3M, which contributed $50,000 in November 2018. 3M has dozens of active contracts with multiple government agencies, including 2 large contracts with the Department of Defense worth more than $53 million. A third company, Michigan-based KMW Group, contributed $10,000 in July 2018 to Outsider PAC, which spent money in support of unsuccessful Michigan Republican Senate candidate John James. In November 2018, KMW Group subsidiary Skytron LLC, which has active contracts with the Veterans Department and the Department of Health and Human Services, contributed another $10,000 to Outsider PAC, prompting a complaint from CLC, Campaign Legal Center, regarding its seemingly illegal contribution. Following the complaint, Outsider PAC amended its filings with the FEC to reattribute the contribution to KMW Group. However, KMW Group is also a government contractor and had an active contract with the Department of Veterans Affairs worth nearly $500,000 at the time of that contribution, and the one that it made in July. Since 1940, companies that have contracts with the government or are in negotiations to secure contracts have been banned from making, quote, any contribution of money or other things of value, or to promise expressly or impliedly to make any such contribution to any political party, committee, candidate for public office, or to any person for any political purpose or use. The contractor contribution ban has been upheld by federal courts after the 2010 Citizens United versus FEC decision, most recently in the Wagner decision. The reason for the ban, as explained by the CLC's Federal Reform Program Director, Brendan Fisher, is to prevent pay-to-play in the contracting process. Quote, handing out taxpayer-funded government contracts to political contributors not only looks bad, but it warps government priorities, Fisher said. Quote again, federal contractors have a lot to gain by making large contributions to super PACs, and decisions about which private companies are handed taxpayer money should be based on the public's interest, not what's in the interest of a politician's biggest donors. Indeed, some of the politicians who benefited from 2018 election spending by the super PACs funded by the government contractors have the power to influence government policies that could affect those contractors, and they could even influence the contractors themselves. For example, Representative Will Hurd, Republican of Texas, benefited from more than $1 million that was spent by the Congressional Leadership Fund on independent expenditures opposing his 2018 Democratic challenger, Gina Ortiz-Jones. Hurd sits on the House Appropriations Committee, which approves spending for all government operations and contracts. He is also a member of the Appropriation Committee's Subcommittee on Military Construction for Veterans Affairs, which has jurisdiction over the agencies with which Congressional Leadership Fund donors 3M and Alpha Marine Services have active contracts. Representative Don Bacon, Republican of Nebraska, is a member of the House Armed Services Committee, which has broad jurisdiction over defense policy, including acquisitions and contract workforces. The Congressional Leadership Fund spent $63,000 supporting Bacon in his 2018 election and $1.2 million against his Democratic opponent, Kara Eastman. Other beneficiaries of Congressional Leadership Fund spending who sit on committees with jurisdiction over issues affecting the PAC's contractor donors include Foreign Affairs Committee members Representative Steve Shabbat, Republican of Ohio, and Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania, and Appropriations Committee member Representative Jamie Ferrara Beutler, Republican of California.
You're about out of time, Lee. Could you wind it up?
Yep. Despite the conflicts of interests that are presented when government contractors make illegal political contributions, the FEC is not working to check for those donations in order to enforce the prohibition. Quote, to my knowledge, the FEC is not reviewing reports for any potential contractors, so they really rely on outside groups to file complaints. It's not something that they're undertaking on their own, said Fisher. With this lack of government review, CLC and other watchdog groups have taken on this task. CLC reviews super PAC filings from the FEC and cross-references corporate contributions against lists of companies with active government contracts that are publicly available at the usaspending.gov website. Other political donations by government contractors have also been discovered, including some from GEO Acquisitions, a wholly owned subsidiary of private prison giant GEO Group, which has valuable contracts with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Lee, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
You can put that in the record if you.
Yeah. Next. Lee, you want to leave that with the court?
Greg Coleridge.
Your name and address for the record, sir? You want to pull that down? Just take the microphone out.
Okay. Yeah, it's easier that way.
It's hard to get it low enough, oftentimes in my case. Greg Coleridge, 3016 Somerton Road, Cleveland Heights. I'm the Outreach Director for the National Move to Amend Coalition. Happy Democracy Day, Kent. Happy Democracy Day. Congratulations to those of you who circulated this petition to get this measure on the ballot. And kudos to those who voted for, if you remember, democracy for you and me, yes, on issue 43.
Could you address us?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And kudos to the organizers for somehow convincing the state of Ohio to support this initiative by having state road signs with the exact number go right through the center of town. Pretty amazing, huh? Kent is one of more than 500 communities and more than a dozen states that have passed a similar resolution or ballot initiative and counting across the country. Over 460,000 people have signed our National Move to Amend petition calling for a constitutional amendment, that being H.J.R. 48, We the People Amendment. Hundreds of organizations have endorsed, and 65 co-sponsors at the federal level have endorsed this, co-sponsored the We the People Amendment, including your congressional representative that represents this area, Tim Ryan. This growing movement is a reflection of the growing disconnect, contributing to the growing movement for transformational change. That disconnect between what people want on issue after issue and the kind of policies we have or don't have. And it's also, this movement, a reflection of the growing awareness of the absurdity of money being defined as constitutional free speech and corporations having constitutional rights, neither of which existed at the time of this country's founding. Many have said that the greatest threat to democracy or a democratic republic is the mistaken belief that we actually have an authentic one. We the people have never been all the people. People with property have always had more rights. The social movements in this country that have driven the rights of people of color and women are a testament to that. While white male property owners were certainly well shielded by the Constitution, Corporations were not. They, in fact, aren't mentioned. Thus, corporations were defined by subordinate creations of the state, only able to provide goods and services as instructed in their charters or licenses, which are passed only at one at a time by state legislatures. Corporate entities only acquired constitutional rights because activist Supreme Court justices fictionally interpreted parts of the Constitution and constitutional amendments to apply to these artificial legal creations of government. Corporate constitutional rights or corporate personhood goes well beyond corporate political money spent in elections being defined as First Amendment free speech. Much of what you hear about corporate personhood is singularly focused on that dimension. As harmful to people, places, and the planet, and to democracy itself as this is, there's so much more. Corporations have hijacked constitutional amendments and parts of the original Constitution, which have impacted people like you at the local level. For example, a state law mandating the labeling of certain ingredients in food have been overturned as violating a corporation's right not to speak under the First Amendment. Employees of a corporation wanting to access contraception coverage have been denied by the court as a violation of the business corporation's First Amendment religious rights. That's the Hobby Lobby decision. A state regulation limiting the amount of fossil fuels that can be extracted from the ground has been overturned as violating a corporation's takings rights under the Fifth Amendment. This could have profound direct implications as people currently are trying to keep fossil fuels in the ground to save the climate. Laws giving preferential treatment to locally owned over big box stores have been overturned by corporations claiming the law discriminates under the 14th Amendment. Numerous laws limiting the importation of toxic materials and other items in communities in the name of health, safety, and welfare have been overturned under the Constitution's Commerce Clause that places the principle of commerce or trade over the principle of protecting the health, safety, and welfare. The list goes on and on to include the numerous instances of local laws across the country that have been preempted or, dare I say, trumped by state laws or the courts to protect corporate interests over community concerns. The point being, as I close, elections are not enough. Laws are not enough. Regulations are not enough. Not when the foundational rules and the interpretation of those rules are rigged to protect corporate rights over human rights and the rights to a livable world. Amending the Constitution to abolish not only political money in elections as First Amendment protected free speech, but also all forms of corporate personhood is what's needed. That's what the We the People Amendment is about, which is what the initiative here in this community affirmed. Only people are persons. Victor Hugo once said, "Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come." Thank you, Kent, for contributing to this growing awareness and to shifting the culture. Prerequisites to changing our foundational governing rules. This is an idea we respectfully believe, and the citizens of Kent affirmed, and a proposal whose time has come.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Coleridge, do you have a statement you'd like to submit?
Want it now, or do you want me to clean it up?
Okay, you can give it to me.
I can get it afterward.
Okay.
Who's next?
Kathy Hazelton.
Name and address for the record.
My name is Kathy Hazelton, 19601 Van Aken Boulevard, Shaker Heights. Apologies for getting down here late. This traffic is bad on 271. I'd like to speak on State Bill 33, an attack on our right to peacefully protest. Last December, a bill passed in the Ohio Senate and moved to the House, which claims to protect critical infrastructure from mischief by making it a felony to peacefully protest power plants and gas lines on private property, even on one's own private property. Since Ohio already has criminal trespass law, a primary purpose of that bill, called Senate Bill 250 in last year's General Assembly, appeared to be to discourage peaceful protest against environmental hazards by raising the penalty from a misdemeanor to a felony. As originally written, SB 250 would have carried a prison sentence of 11 years for peaceful protest on the property of power plants and gas lines. After opposition testimony in November from over 30 individuals and many environmental and free speech organizations, including the League of Women Voters, Sierra Club, and Buckeye Environmental Network, as well as the ACLU, the charge was softened to a third-degree felony, but still carried a prison term of 3 years. Now, SB 33, the bill also intimidates Ohio organizations by fining them $100,000 if they object to or impede certain private infrastructure or work with citizens exercising their free speech and association rights. These penalties seem excessive. I suppose, one might ask why citizens would feel the need to trespass on private property to protest against power plants and gas lines. Don't we have a democratic process to make our voices heard? Well, the democratic process is not working all that well. For one thing, citizens have had their voices drowned out because of a gerrymandered legislature and campaign finance laws which permit oil and gas companies and trade associations to make virtually limitless contributions to candidates who will do their will. Second, many bills introduced into the Ohio House and Senate are drafted in a national organization where corporate lobbyists and state legislators create model bills which often diminish citizens' rights and benefit the corporation's bottom line. It is likely that this bill was drafted with the influence of lobbyists for the oil and gas industry. Not surprisingly, it resembles bills introduced in states across the country since shortly after the protests of the Dakota Access Pipeline near Standing Rock. Those bills have become laws in many states. Since the state's corrupt legislative process is drowning out our voices, Ohioans have attempted to have their voices heard through citizens' initiatives like this one. But the results of these initiatives are not always upheld. Although the Columbus Community Bill of Rights and an environmental group gathered over 12,000 signatures to place an anti-fracking initiative on the November 6, 2018 ballot, seeking to ban oil and natural gas extraction and waste disposal in Columbus, the Franklin County Board of Elections questioned the legality of the proposed ballot measure, and in October, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Board of Elections. Citizens in Athens County have been protesting applications for Class II injection wells in their county since 2011. Ohio has never granted a public hearing to Athens County officials and citizens to record their grave and substantive concerns, which are highly relevant to the health and safety and good conservation practices, as Ohio injection well law requires. Finally, a group called Ohioans for Energy Security, backed by big energy interests, is running ads, as you all have seen on TV and probably at your doorstep, to keep Ohioans from signing petitions to get a referendum on the ballot that would lead to a popular vote on whether to bail out First Energy's 2 nuclear power plants. So, back to the need for protest. The Ohio Constitution guarantees Ohioans the right to assemble in a peaceable manner to consult for the common good, to instruct their representatives, and to petition the General Assembly for the redress of grievances. The health of our environment is a common good. We have a right to clean air and drinkable water, and the right to freedom from diseases caused by leakage of toxic chemicals into our ground. But it appears that the profits of corporations are more important to our lawmakers than the health and safety of the people. If our legislators do not listen to us, but to corporations pushing for legislation in their own interests, if citizens' initiatives are restricted and ignored, we must protest, and we must insist that our state representatives prevent SB 33 from becoming law. We cannot sit by and let our children and grandchildren suffer because moneyed interests and our political leaders prefer to put their heads in the sand. I ask for your support of efforts to stop this anti-protest bill and end the ride of runaway train of corporate personhood which overrides the rights of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you read that with the court? Thank you. Is there further?
Yeah. That's it.
All right.
Thank you
I
so
want to
much.
thank you for all coming and sharing your concerns with us. The public hearing is adjourned. We are going to, next thing will be the Board of Control, and we're actually going to go into the committee. The Board of Control, and that's you.
Okay,
To watch and then share with your colleagues on the council.
okay.
And it is to explain the local aspect of the local government.
Okay.
We're West Main
Okay.
Street and
Because it's big.
Okay.
Yeah, but you guys are paying insurance.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're self-insured.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're probably still not big enough to get the savings you need.
Yeah, so you want me to return this when I'm done then? I'll make, no, you got
You
another?
can actually, they can actually access it there.
I have
for free.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
I can get as many copies as I want.
I'll give that to our clerk of council tomorrow, and have her forward it on to all the other council members.
I noticed the same thing.
If you want copies, you want that email.
surprised. I think the word got out.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it was prolific the first time. Now it is-
Believe it or not, that is, insurance is big business. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Appreciate it. You have a nice night.
Thank you.
All right, so we got the minutes from September 18th, it looks like.
Okay. I wasn't here, so I didn't.
Go? Doesn't matter, we're gonna go.
That's just because Mike Wells didn't
All right.
finish his job.
All right, we're gonna, if we could have a little quiet back there, I apologize for saying that, but we're gonna get going here. We're gonna start the committee of the whole, and the first thing on the agenda is the City Hall project update, and I take it Dave, Melanie's gonna handle this?
Yeah, between the Nancy and Melanie, Mayor, you know, we had a follow-up meeting with the staff, what, last week or 2 weeks ago? I've lost track of our weeks now. Last week?
Last week.
And so we're kind of zeroing in on the final versions, although I will say after that meeting, I know Nancy had a few things that she was going to have to update. So it's not complete as far as the draft concept, but it's getting close, so.
Ah.
Not ready to cut the grass yet? It's kind of funny.
This is that no-mow grass we're gonna have to. Get a couple more goats.
Get some of that goat grass like we got at the police
I've heard we
station.
had goats here before.
Yeah, we gotta do, yeah, we.
Thank you.
Let's give it to.
Is this on?
It is.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
I think Tracy must have forgot too. I think she works too on Wednesday.
She won't be here until
Teacher, we
she
said
told me
hello.
she's got teaching a class. So if you're about a
Dad and
quarter
I
out.
hired her.
Yeah. Aren't they supposed to wait till the end to make sure they stay for the whole thing?
Because we'll tattle. Oh, that one, I knew one of them was.
Where'd Melanie go?
It's all right, I'm going to start.
Go ahead.
You're it?
I'm it.
Go, Nancy.
All right. Hello, everyone. Great to see you again. So as Dave mentioned, we've been having ongoing meetings with what we're calling kind of our steering committee, all the department heads who are going to be in the building, in addition to the mayor and Melanie. So this is an update. You have little pictures there in front of you. What has changed from this is what we all shared at Heritage Festival. What has changed since this is we're trying to squeeze out some square footage, tighten it up a little bit, both for efficiency and for cost reasons. So the exterior is still, oh, I got some static cling, close to that. What we have done, we've actually removed half a bay off of this end, the wing that's the office wing, and we've tightened up the wing that is council chambers, kind of in all directions, just to eliminate any of the fluff and try and tighten things up. All of the functions are still here. We still have, this is the lower level
with the main public lobby off at the lower level, come in and enter council chambers, public restrooms. The office wing back here is essentially storage areas, staff break room, a shared workroom that will include things like the postage machine and the shredder and some of those things that all departments will share. And there's even room for another conference room down here. One of the comments that we've received in the last iterations of the plans is we need more storage. And there is some long-term storage in the service building right now that all of these departments use. It would be great to get that stuff over here, and we think we can. So right now we're showing 2 different rooms in the basement, the ground level of this building that can be for finance and utility. And this is about at least 50% more than the storage they currently are using over in the service garage. So there's room for growth in terms of storage down in this lower area. Over here where council chambers is, we still have our executive session conference room, a restroom, and an office for council members to use that you can access from the public hallway as well as the rear hallway there and our elevator. As we move up, I'm just going to go through quickly, and you can stop me whenever you want. We get to the first floor, the entry that where you enter from the parking lot. We come in this way. We have the public lobby. We can look down into council chambers. Civil service is over here with a conference room right next door. This conference room can be used by anybody in the building, but it happens to be right next to civil service, so all those functions can happen there. Public restrooms and a janitor's closet stack on all floors right over here. Then most of this floor is finance and utility. So we have utility counters here. There will be a glass divider with transaction windows there to do their work, but there will be a glass divider between the public and the staff here. We have another glass kind of divider here to separate the tax counter so that there's a little privacy there for those transactions to happen there, and for her to deal with the people in the tax area in a little separately from the main utility counters. Then what's kind of shown here in green is what we would consider this department suite, the office suite back here. So all of this space is used by this department. We've pushed and pulled a little bit with the different offices and the workspaces. We've looked at each of their existing workspaces. We've documented all of the file cabinets, so we make sure that we have all the storage both in the office areas that we need, and then again, the long-term storage. So this is our current layout here for utility billing and finance. I do have some little notations over here. Currently, finance occupies about 1,500 square feet. We're giving them about 2,100 square feet in this building. Utility billing occupies about just over 600 square feet, and we're bumping them up to about 800 square feet. So we do have some incremental, if you go over there, they're pretty tight. So this is not too generous, but we feel is appropriate for their future use. When we go to the top floor, the upper level, again, we have a public lobby here. This kind of aqua color is clerk of council and mayor and city manager, assistant city manager, that kind of an office suite. We have a large conference room in the middle. The clerk of council has a large office so that it will include the copier, the files, the storage. There's even room for a layout table here for all of the work that the clerk of council does. There's a little storage room right next to the clerk's office for clerk storage. And right now we're showing the actual storage capacity that is in the service center right now for their long-term storage, whether this is here or downstairs, and then there's some other clerk storage that's right here. But there's ample storage near the clerk right now. As we come down to this end, we're still working on this end. This is new. You don't even have your copies over there. For some of you, there is a desire to have the law department really as its own suite and separate it off from the other offices. So this pink, we do have an office for an economic development director here. It's kind of a standalone off of the main lobby. Then we've kind of moved the division of where we go into the law department so that there is a shared workroom that can be accessed from the mayor and city manager department, as well as the law department. And then we have more of a segregated law department here with a lot of long-term file storage right here, ample space for the administrative assistant, law director, assistant law director, files. And then we have the HR manager that's still kind of part of this suite, but is down at the other end because they also work with finance and utility. So they can be right up and down the stairs from finance and utility. There's a storage room here that can be dedicated to HR if needed, and another conference room there. So again, hopefully we're getting the relationships better. I think this still might need a little tweaking. Hope it's the first time you've seen this different layout. And we'll work through it and make sure that we accommodate what we need to there. From the exterior, I intentionally brought this as black and white because I know we're going to get into colors, and I don't want to put something up here that you're like, oh, that doesn't look like this one did. So we'll get there. But this just shows, we're trying to develop this a little further, but this shows the half a bay shorter on the other side. The end over here is a little bit smaller, but if I put this here, we're still consistent with what we had before, working our way towards the back. This is actually the stairwell, the egress stair in the corner over here. So we're showing some windows in here, but this might be a little more, we're showing this more enclosed here with our other access door out here, and then we have the glass everywhere else. So we're still definitely a work in progress. We just wanted to share with you where we are today. The last thing I gave you, ooh, was that me? Oh, hello? Okay, sorry. Is a little list to tell you where we are in terms of square footage and anticipated costs. When we kind of finished the concept work, the concept planning, we were between 21,000 and 25,000 square feet with just a building program and not a floor plan layout. Today, the usable space is 24,000 square feet, so we're pretty close to that target from the program. However, we have a couple two-story spaces. If we include the volume of that second level of both the lobby area and the council chambers, we're just over 28,000 square feet. So the reason we're looking at these numbers is for costs. At this stage, we're looking at a general square foot cost. The square foot of that air, the square foot cost of that air is less than maybe the first floor, but you still have walls, you still have mechanical systems, you still have lighting. So, so that's why we kind of have the range in there. So we're using that square footage kind of as our range. We're also looking at two different ranges of square foot cost, between $250 a square foot and $300 a square foot. There will be some parts of the building that will be more expensive than others, so we try to average it out. But to give you a sense of where we are based on this square footage, we are somewhere between $6 and $8 million, depending on how we cut this thing apart. The other thing that we are looking at over council chambers, we have right now kind of a roof area there that we've talked about. Do we build it out now? Do we build it out later? Whatever we do, we would structure it so that you could, if we don't build it out now, we would structure it so you could build it out later. We would structure it so we could have solar panels or what have you on that roof. That space on that floor is just over 3,200 square feet. So right now I'm just estimating that at about $200 a square foot. So that'd be about another $600,000, $650,000 if we wanted to build that out fully. Might be a little less than that if we just do shell space, if all we're doing is putting up walls and a roof and leave it pretty bare until the future. So as we work through the plans and we get more detailed cost estimates, we'll continue to look at that as an option. Because I know for you to make a real decision on that, we need to have some more firm numbers. So we will continue to carry that as a line item, as an option in the future. The last thing we have on here, we don't have a site plan here yet that's updated. We do have an initial layout on the site that shows about 57 parking spaces, which is one or two more than what you have right now over there. So we'll continue to look at that and see if we can get as many spaces as we can with the space that we currently have available.
Okay,
That's what I have to share.
All right, questions from council to Nancy? Mr. Ferrara?
Thank you, Nancy,
Garret.
especially for bringing the cost. That makes it, it's kind of like the pink elephant nobody wanted to talk about, so it's good to get that number out in the public.
Oh, Dave Coffey has a way to take care of that whole
Yeah.
thing, so don't worry about it.
That's why we make him go last all the time. So, on the lower level for the council chambers, I thought one of the issues that we had talked about, and then maybe, just correct me if I'm wrong, was the access for council to get into an exec session without having to clear out the room necessarily. And so, I guess I figured that the executive conference room and that space would be behind council chambers, so you could simply just walk behind you and get into that thing and not have, and that you don't have to
Yeah.
disrupt the public that's already there, or.
Yeah, right now you can just walk right past and still get there. You're just
Yeah,
walking
yeah,
past
but
instead of
it does
behind.
create
So we,
potential issues.
yeah, we had it turned the other way, and we got some
Okay.
comments to turn it this way so that people, when they're either looking in or walking in, they're not coming into the side. The way this is, we've been tightening this up.
Yeah.
This is basically a square.
Right. But I
So
guess,
if you wanted
couldn't
to
you
turn
push
it,
that-
we could
but
turn
no,
it.
Couldn't you push it towards the elevator and have that conference space behind? So you'd still have faced the same way, you would just, okay,
Well, you want the conference space
Behind
back
there.
here.
behind there.
Have to look at that.
Yeah, I think just for the ease of access to that space by council and not having to necessarily go through the crowd, and it just facilitates
Block the egress.
access, I think.
Okay.
My thought. I mean, other than that, looks good.
Any other questions from council? Gwen?
I just, on I guess it would be the second floor or third floor with the mayor's office and city manager's office. How did you envision, or did you envision, like in potential information desk for reading, or, like if the public is coming in?
The main entry of the building?
Well, just, so you're coming up the public lobby, you're essentially just kind of walking into those office spaces. Did you, I mean,
There is room here, and we've kind of talked about, is there someone that's a greeter? Do we have staff for that or not? We could envision developing some kind of a reception desk, maybe in conjunction with the stair or something like that. So I do think there is some room here for that. Right now, we just kind of have it at each department as you go upstairs. But if you wanted to have a central kind of check-in spot in the lobby, then we'll find a way to put that in there.
I mean, just kind of part information, part security, just to make sure that the people up in those spaces, feel secure. Or, the public is greeted as they come up, if they're not wandering, and the people working in those office spaces, if they need to work undisturbed, or if they're working later in the evening, or whatever the scenario may be, just that there's a bit of a pause before you kind of go right to somebody's.
Kind of like the high
Yeah.
school.
Kind of, I guess, just a little
Yeah.
bit, I mean.
Like we did at
Yeah,
high school.
all of the office areas are secured, so they're behind a security access
Okay,
door.
okay, yeah.
But yet you still need to know that somebody's there looking for you. So, yeah, having some place where you can check in or someone can direct you or something, we can work
I
on
mean,
that.
for sure.
Okay. John?
So if you looked into a way to move that around for the council, like Garret suggested, then it would almost force you to put the egress door in the front of the building, would it not?
The egress door out this side?
Yeah, it would
Is that what you're talking
almost
about? Yeah.
You'd almost have to.
Yeah, and we actually might need to because of the way the site slopes. We haven't worked all that out yet. So we may have this egress door coming out this side anyway. But that would, that'd be fine if that happened back there.
It looks like there is room where it might even eliminate that need for that hallway, that small hallway.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
Probably.
Thanks.
I mean, I don't care either way. I'll walk by people. It don't matter to me.
I feel the same way, John.
I'm
I
happy.
kind of like it the way it is.
I'm happy with what I see, but, you know.
Oh, John, you're happy?
So,
We're happy.
so so behind council, the council desks there, you don't have a picture of that, is that a window to look out on? So people will see the,
Right now, we have windows on this side and this side,
not on that side?
but not on the
Yeah.
back side.
The door back there.
Okay.
So you're not losing that.
Got to be a fire door back there.
Yeah, that's where the beautiful.
And we can develop that. If we did, they might be windows up high. If you want to get some windows up there, it depends on
Well,
how you want to lay out the room.
I'm not so sure, I find it that important, but I thought the idea of having the council dais up there was that you look back and you'd look over the windows, and maybe that's why it was, if you had it to the left, then you'd have the windows and you'd be looking out on the city and the main, onto downtown, and it'd be a nice visual for people that are looking at, that are attending the council
Yeah.
meeting, so.
Dais would be there, just move that.
We can show it to you a couple different ways
Yeah.
as we move forward, and then you'll be able to
Yeah.
figure out what you like better. There's no problem.
And
We
don't
can do
forget
that.
the
Just
sun.
my one opinion, that's
Robin?
Yeah, Dave, we've budgeted how much for this? Because she's coming in at 6,
Right, right.
8.
No, what Dave Coffey, when you ask what budget, we already had 2 million in the bank. So that wasn't the budget for the project, but that was what we're going to use, sort of the down payment, so to speak, right? And then the presumption is, Dave ran a bunch of charts for the borrowing, and of course, interest rates being very competitive right now, it's a very favorable borrowing market. And this price range, Dave said, is very workable within the existing budget. So the annual debt service on it can be absorbed particularly well because the fire department debt is coming off. So as that comes off, those dollars could, in essence, just now be used to pay this building. So it's kind of a wash in terms of the financial books, so to speak, and,
Lateral move.
what's that?
Kind of a lateral move.
Kind of.
Yeah. You done, Robin?
Yes, thank you.
Roger?
Yeah, out of curiosity, Melanie, it's silly, but remember the conversations we had back and forth on the bus? Should we have should we be elevated? Should we be sunk? Should we be on the floor level? Have we landed that plane yet? I'm kind of curious.
We're showing right now just like 6 inches up.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. But we have to have, the one side we have to have a ramp, the other side we have to, but it's just 6 inches up, just so that everybody can see you.
Well, I guess the reason I broached this, because that also has an impact. If we move, wherever we move that, then we're going to raise that 6 inches.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
John?
Yeah, one more thing on our switch around here. The last thing I want to do is sit here and have the sun facing me and blinding me, because I have enough time with just one little window sometime.
Yeah.
So,
All right, we'll look at that.
Get that the way it is now, you're
like
not
it
going
the
to be
way it
looking
is.
at the sun.
right, that's why I like it.
Heidi?
Yeah, just on that same kind of topic, I just kind of favor moving the council bench, or whatever we call this thing, over below the windows on the west side, because that would make it easy to get to the conference
public
room,
look
to
at
the
the sun.
restroom. We won't have to walk through the giant crowd, we can walk behind or whatever, if we just move the seating. I don't know. It just seems like it would be a little bit easier.
Yeah, we can also look at putting the dais in the corner. We haven't shown that yet. So I'm going to look at a bunch of different options, and we'll bring it back to you and see what feels right.
Any other questions?
The last thing we have, you're going to...
Yeah, so I think we're at a point where I would like to go ahead and have a public hearing with this and actually invite the public to come in and actually see the floor plans, see what the elevations are going to be. And so I'm looking around the first week of November. I think that's a good time. It's still before the holidays. I think we can attract a lot of people to come in. And we were thinking about maybe even doing it before the next council meeting or working it in that way. So it would be a public meeting, not that you would have to be here for that or that you would be sitting up here. It would be mostly just for the public, and Nancy and I would have an opportunity to share that with the public, show them what the designs are, and explain where we are on that. So we'll keep you posted as to when we actually set that date and time. Okay?
Is there anything further on this? If not, I think we're moving ahead.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Go put that.
I'll go put it back.
The next thing on the agenda is council balloting procedure discussion. I think the law director's going to handle that.
I am. Thank you, Mayor. I sent out a memorandum to council a couple weeks ago indicating that a Supreme Court decision had come to my attention regarding secret ballots. And I indicated that with that opinion, council's procedure in voting on board and commission members would have to change. And that change would either have to be voice votes as a group, roll call votes, or if you wanted to continue to sending your ballot down my way so that I can tally, that would be fine, but I would have to announce Mr. Sidoti voted for John Doe, Mr. Kuhar voted for, and then there would be no difference in the way that we would proceed with the ordinance. I personally believe that because the secret ballot was, in our case, was followed by an actual ordinance where there was a voice vote, I think that that was enough to make each of the appointments to those vacancies on these boards valid, but I just want to tighten up our procedure now so that we don't get in trouble in the future. I also took the opportunity in my memo to describe to you what the two cities that I worked for before I came to Kent would do with their appointments and vacancies on boards and commissions. And what Cuyahoga Falls and Beechwood would do would allow the administration to take resumes, take applications to all the boards and commissions, and the administration would spend the time to vet the individuals, possibly do background checks, and could even go into looking at references. And then at that point, the administration would bring back to council their recommendation for who they would like council to place on each of the boards and commissions. Now, with that being said, I know that this council likes being involved in that process. So if that's something that you would want to consider, I thought possibly doing like they did with Park and Rec, where you all have placed Gwen as a liaison with Park and Rec, and she was able to sit through some of the vetting. So I thought I'd throw that out there too, that if you'd like to try a more detailed vetting process and allow the administration to help you with that, but you wanted to keep your hands on it some, maybe you could put a couple of your own members on the vetting commission, and then the administration and your members could come back to full council with a recommendation.
Do I understand, and I don't know where, someplace in the archives, it became the responsibility of council to pick these boards and commissions. Now you're going to take it out of the hands of council and put it into city manager?
No, it is council's responsibility to appoint members to boards and commissions. I'm just suggesting that you allow for, that you could consider, you don't have to, you could consider allowing the administration to spend time doing the vetting for you, instead of having the candidates come and talk to you for 5 or possibly 10 minutes at council. We could vet them. We could bring them in and interview them if you'd like us to do that. If that's something that you don't want to do, you don't have to do that. But no, you would still be doing the appointing.
All right. Heidi?
So are you saying that our executive session where we talk about, where we have the opportunity to discuss that vetting is not
okay to do
anymore,
No,
or?
no, that's not what I'm saying, because you're still
Right.
allowed to go in executive session for personnel reasons. What I'm saying is, the night of committee or council meeting, when you all come in and get your green pieces of paper and you mark, who you vote for, or who you choose for each of your committee meeting, or your commissions or boards, and then it's given to me and I tally them up, that's what you are not allowed to do.
Right, I understand that, okay.
That's all you're not allowed to do.
Okay, but we added the executive session as a way of vetting, as a way of, if there are any comments from staff or any of us that, maybe have some additional information to.
Right, understood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to talk about. I kind of like that. I'd like to see it kind of, well, I'm not going to say my opinion right now, but.
Here, so could we do both and have the administration do some initial vetting, but also have council, or have the applicants have their time that they could be asked by the council at whole?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're talking.
The procedure's really yours
Right.
to decide how you would like to proceed. I was just giving you options.
Robin?
Hope, the aspect of this being a secret ballot, it's not, because we're actually putting our names on it. And based on that, I think that's not a secret ballot. That's not, people would have the opportunity to know who we voted for if they choose to actually approach the clerk, however long we're holding the ballots. They, for us to have to do it out loud, that then makes us compliant with the state requirements, but our names are on those ballots. When we do that, we're actually signing our names to whoever we want to vote for. So the public at any time can have the right to come in and look at those votes, and with our names next to them. That isn't, to me, that's not a secret ballot process when we do it that way. So I'm just wondering, we're out of compliance right now.
The city of Bracknell, or the village of Bracknell, had nearly the exact same facts in voting for a president pro tem of their council. And I will disagree with you, Robin. You may put your name on some of those ballots, but when I tally them up, there have been many that have not had the council person's name on them. But in Bracknell, the council people voted for who they wanted for president pro tem. They sent their ballot down to the solicitor. The solicitor tallied up the votes and then said, Joe Blow is president pro tem. And the Supreme Court said no. Open meetings law requires all deliberations to be held in public, and the members of public have the right to hear either you, Robin, say, I vote for Joe Blow, or for you to send your ballot to me, and then I say, Robin Turner votes for. Not just for me to read a piece of paper that no one out there can see. So unfortunately, I was surprised at how similar our facts were to Bracknell, except we took the extra step of having a separate ordinance.
Roger?
I want to make sure, wait, wasn't John before me? I thought I was before everybody.
I called you, Roger.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure that we're clear here, because I think we have like three different issues that have been put on the table. The primary issue, Hope, if I understand it correctly, is we have to ballot differently.
Correct.
Okay, so that's really the big issue.
That's the big issue.
And we have to make that decision. I think the process of having, I like to see candidates that want to serve on our board standing in front of the whole public also, because I think it works both ways. I think if you're, I know I'm giving my opinion, but I just think that it works both ways, that if in fact we're going to be held accountable to say, I vote for Hope Jones, then I think it's important that they stand in front of the public and the public can hear them and we can hear them. I think it's a kind of a quid pro quo there. So I think if that's the issue, then I think that's the issue we should focus on. And we could probably go into a committee at some point and have a further discussion as to our processes after that.
Sure.
I think,
Sure,
because
yeah.
you know, we're all kind of bouncing around here, but I think your primary issue, if I read that, what you sent out, was we got to change our voting process.
Right, correct.
We finished? John?
Let me run this simple scenario by you. Okay, we have always in the past got a packet with the resumes from the people that want to be on the commission. So we retain that. We keep getting the packet so we can read them over prior to the meeting. The people come in, they give their spiel. We retain that. We go to our council meeting, we've had 2 weeks to review the resumes. We've saw the people in person, and we have a verbal vote and it's over. It's very simple.
Right.
And it eliminates the piece of paper being passed out. How's that look?
That would be just fine, because that would be basically what you're doing now, except what I've asked you to do is in a voice vote. And then whichever candidate gets the most votes, then we would prepare the ordinance or just put that
I think
name in.
most of us, at least I'll speak for myself, at least when I hear the candidate and I've looked at their criteria, I've marked them down for the next meeting that night. So I already know who I'm going to vote for unless something drastically changes. So,
Gwen, you have your hand up? Tracy, you have your?
I guess maybe I did, maybe subconsciously. Hope, do you, in your experience in previous cities, have there been situations where additional information that the city had, either through references or that little bit of background check, influenced the decision that was later made by council, information that maybe would not have been available during a brief interview?
Maybe once or twice.
Okay.
Yeah, not a lot.
Thank you.
Tracy?
I don't see a problem with having a voice roll call because that's how they do it in the federal government. Yeah. But I also would like to make it a requirement that the person who wants to be selected has to come to council, in front of council also, because I don't vote for any people that they just put their name in and then they don't bother to come to council. I mean, I think that they should make a bit of an effort, so I think that should be a requirement at least. I mean, if they can't come on a specific night, then another time somehow.
Further, Roger?
Yeah, one last thing, I want to reiterate what Heidi said. I really think that, you know, a few years ago when we had multiple candidates for positions and we decided as a council that we would go into executive session, that was really valuable because that's when we got some information that helped us make those decisions. I thought it was important to hear, like, for instance, what Garret knew or thought about a certain candidate. It helped me understand how he was thinking, or Gwen, or John, and I just think that that's a real important process that I don't want to see us lose, because I think that helps a lot to get at what Gwen's suggesting. I mean, Dave's invited to those, and he can be part of that, and we have, if there's some information we need to know, we can get it from there. I don't want to lose that. That, to me, is real valuable.
There further? I guess I understand this to be, and Robin, you're always about transparency, and I think that's what we're doing. We're going to have the same procedure, interview the candidates, have an executive session to talk about it, but we're going to publicly vote, and somebody's going to make a motion, second it, and you're going to vote for the candidate. Is that what I understand?
Yep.
All right. What do you need from us?
A motion, I'll move that we follow what the mayor just said.
Wow.
That was actually a paraphrasing of what John said, so.
Okay.
I would make a motion that that's the process that we use, and it's a voice vote.
Is there a second?
Second it, but.
What? Let me go to the audience. Does anybody in the audience want to share anything on this?
Oh, we forgot about that.
All right, back to, now Roger, make your motion.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we keep the processes that we have in place, except that we do a voice vote individually for every position.
Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I'm seconding, but is this in the understanding that if we feel that an executive session is necessary, we call it, not just for every, yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Well, are we changing the way that the candidates present themselves too?
No.
So they don't have to come then?
Yeah,
They have to come.
They have to come.
They fill out their application.
Right.
We'll have a meeting. They're invited to come to the meeting. It's their choice whether they want to come to the meeting or not come to the
So they
meeting.
don't have to come then?
Well, that's the way it is now. The only thing we're changing from what we did before is we're not going to do balloting and have the law director or somebody check them. We're going to do this publicly.
All right. Well, then I'm not going to support it because I want to make can I do an amendment where the candidates are required at some point in time to come in front of council?
Do another vote.
I don't think
Do
we're saying
another
they're not.
motion.
They're invited.
I
She
know,
wants
but
it
it's not
mandatory.
required.
You want it mandatory?
Yeah,
All right, you can make that amendment.
I'll second that amendment.
I just did, yeah.
All right.
No?
Tracy, you have more on your amendment discussion?
He can't second that.
Yeah, he can't second it.
He
Yeah, he
seconded the
can't second
original
because
one.
he's the seconder of the first motion.
Yeah, that's true.
Second both of them.
I'll second it for discussion.
All right. Tracy, do you have more discussion?
No, I think if we're going to do a voice vote in front of everybody, then I think everybody should be able to view the candidate that's running for that position also. I don't think that should be like a secret ballot either, because if they don't come, if they don't present themselves to the public, but they get nominated and they get selected to be on the committee, then that's kind of like, nobody knows who they are either.
All right. Garrett, you second it?
I don't think.
All right. Roger?
Well, I agree that we need to hear from the candidates. One of the concerns I do have, though, is that sometimes we have people who are applying a second time, and the question is, do we make them mandatory come here when we already know them and we already voted for them?
Well, not everybody knows them.
Wait. Who else had their hand up or just good? Jack?
Yeah, I think that it should be mandatory. I really, if you want to apply for a position, any position, you're usually interviewed, and you just don't call up and say, yeah, I'd like the job, but I'm not coming. I mean, to me, it means they should be here.
John, did you have more to say? This is on the amendment.
This on the amendment, yeah, the same thing, and I have to agree with Tracy that, okay, well, I'm Joe Blow, I've had this job forever, so, I don't have to jump through any hoops. And I think they should have to jump through hoops. Everybody should show up so the council can hear them and the public can hear them. So
Any more discussion
Ditto,
on
ditto.
Heidi?
Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I just think that operationally, I think it's really good to show up, and I do hold it against people sometimes when they don't come. But, we're asking them, say they're applying to be on a board, or they've been on a board that meets on Monday nights, but Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights on council, they have a longstanding commitment. They just can't make it for Wednesday night, but they could do the job on Monday night. So, will we have an option? Will there be an option embedded in this? If they can't show up on that particular week, then they come to another? It just feels like, it feels so overly,
commitment?
I don't know. It just feels like, okay, so they're really sick, so, they can't make it. They're going to come like on their hospital bed or something because they really, really want to be on the planning commission. There should be some kind of an out. I don't like to do you must, or it's critical.
Done?
Yes.
Jack?
But I guess my question is, how do we know, how can we question these people and ask them pertinent questions if they're not here? And I think a lot of times that's important for us to hear. And I would say that if there are extenuating circumstances, we can work with that. We could probably delay it, maybe, the interview, but I think it's important that they be here.
Is there further? All right, we're going to vote on the amendment of Tracy's amendment to make it mandatory that the person be here, otherwise. So, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
One against?
Two against.
Two.
Three.
What, three? Three against.
Motion passes.
It passed. Now we're going to vote for the original motion as amended. Is there any more discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We have a direction?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well,
That's
that's
it?
what I would like to see. Bill.
Street, is there something you need, Heidi? Heidi, oh. Streets and sidewalks, Mr. Sidoti.
Yes, I'd like to call the Street Sidewalks and Utilities Committee. The first one is our proposed updates to the city's small cell wireless regulations, and
Well, they keep moving
yes, they do, don't they?
the cheese, isn't that the book? They moved our cheese again a little bit, and so we're just trying to keep pace with what the law is allowed and to stay in conformance, and I think we've had the attorney, the sort of the expert working on this for us. Hope's an expert on many things, but not necessarily small cell wireless, so we've been using a firm that's helped us, and he reached out to Hope and said, we need to get this on your agenda, so I don't know if you want to kind of, I think we said it's generally small stuff. It doesn't really substantively change much, but we should still do it, so.
It does not, and I will apologize. Bill Hanna, who you've all met before, was supposed to be here. He is stuck in traffic, as the lady from Shaker Heights was, and I told him that by the time he got down here, we would probably be done with this issue. So if after we talk about it, if you have any questions that I cannot answer, maybe we can just table it. But back in, Bridget, when did we get our first application for, 2 months ago for? So we started going over the ordinance that you all passed for us and trying to put together an application process. And we got some pertinent questions back from the contractors we were working with. So I contacted Bill and I said, Bill, we have some questions and I also need your help on an application. We had a conversation and he indicated that as he has been working with some other municipalities and getting other questions back, and also looking at Federal Communications Commission, their directions, he said, we need to tighten up your code. He said, I've been tightening up other municipalities' codes. And the first tightening we have going on here, and I'm afraid that I bet we will be back many times over the next few years as we all get used to this, these changes have more to do with the application process and defining which types of facilities fit under which types of applications. And those are the changes that he has made for us. He's also provided, which doesn't need to be put in ordinance form, he has provided us with applications for the companies that come in. So that's what we are looking at for the code changes this time around.
Roger?
Roger.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's sitting.
Are there any questions from council?
For you.
Where was I? Well, actually, I didn't tell you where I was. I was thinking about all the conversations we had about this in terms of size of boxes and all
Yep.
that. And I was trying to determine if there were any changes like that, but it
No,
seems that it's not. So.
no, not to the change, not to the size of the boxes.
Since I can't ask a
No.
question, is there any question
okay.
from council? Seeing no questions from council, anyone from the audience want to address this issue? Well, back to council.
Move to approve the emergency.
Second.
Yes, please.
Second.
Anyone, any other comments on it?
You made up for it.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign? There you go.
Okay, Mr. Amrhein, Health and Public Safety.
Yes, we have one thing on our agenda, and that's proposed new film permitting procedures.
Yes, it turns out, I don't know if you saw the Record Courier, we had Liam Nielsen sort of in town today. He was up in the township, but that's kind of neither here nor there. It's just a fun fact that happened to coincide. Harrison's been working with, well, not just Harrison, there's a group of us that met with a couple faculty members from Kent State last year, and they're kind of really gearing up their program and in the film students, in the area of film students, and I guess, I don't know if requiring is the right word, but certainly going to see a lot more activity potentially of filming around the community not everything will be done on campus. So they came to us, to their credit. They said, hey, we don't want to, surprise anybody, and you see a bunch of students out and filming, and, some of them may want to take up some space on a sidewalk somewhere. They may want to sit in a park. What process would you like us to use to guide them? And it's partly a learning lesson for them, because I'm sure as Liam Nielsen was in town, or at least when he's in Cleveland, I know they have film permitting regulations up there. When you're in the professional aspect of the business, you've got to learn that stuff. You got to go to the community, you got to talk to them, what's their requirements. Truth be told, most small communities like us don't really have any complex film. We don't get enough films to really normally have a need for this, and so in those cases, we would generally handle it as like a street type permit, a street closure permit, or whatever. Problem with that is a lot of times that requires like a month to get to you to come in, get your approval, and it could be potentially, depending on the extent of the student interest in closing streets or something, that could be impactful. So this, we think, is a better way. So Harrison has done a short kind of application process that borrows some things from some of the other communities. And at least, as he said to me today, it gets our foot in the door, gives us something to start working with the students with, and if Liam wants to come back, it gives us something to deal with him too. So
Meet him?
We get to meet.
Did you get to meet him?
I'm sorry?
Did you get to meet him?
No, I just saw his picture in the paper, so the courier had it already, right? Did you get to meet him?
I did not. I got to see him walk out of his trailer though, so.
So I have here Scott Holgren. He's an assistant professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, doing digital media production. So he's been working with us in the TE&S committee over the last year to kind of iron out this process, and the form that you'll see attached at the very end of the attachment shows all the things that we're asking anyone that wants to film in the city to supply us to start the process for consideration. So we wanted to have a middle ground in between the special event permit and something that would apply to filming as opposed to a block party or something like that. So something that's specific to filming, but also something that we can do in a short amount of time, because a special event permit, it's required 30 days before, and council approval is needed for road closure. So we wanted to have a way to get it done within 2 weeks and not have council approval, so we could be more streamlined. And Scott can talk about the digital media production if you guys wanted to hear about that.
Sure.
No, I'd like,
Okay, questions? Roger?
yeah, can I ask Scott a question? Do
He's
you
over.
find, oh, there he is, he's there, I wasn't sure what you were saying. Do you find this restrictive, or?
No, as a matter of fact, to brown nose just a little bit, quite frankly, I think the city of Kent has been much more understanding and responsive to this than the leadership at my own school at the moment. But I think that the form that's been put forward has been through a great deal of diligence, and as Harrison mentioned, we've been working on this for close to a year. We wanted to be careful about how we proceeded. We've used, I believe we had some models that we kind of based it on, but we wanted to also keep it simple and be able to address things very quickly, one look at it, and you know the information that you need to know.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Mike?
You don't know if Franklin Township had a form like this, did they? I'm just curious. I don't think so.
I doubt it.
That wasn't one of the organizations we reviewed.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe they'll take ours and.
Right.
Okay, that's all.
John?
I'm trying to figure out how to make this a question, is some of the pop-up activities that we've had in town have resulted in business owners complaining because all of a sudden people can't get access to their business because their streets and sidewalks or something in front of their business is closed. So how do we address that issue?
Part of the requirement that we have added in the last couple of years, we have instantiated a new curriculum, and that curriculum looks an awful lot like what you would find at a major film school in a major city. And essentially, there are steps that you would need to proceed through. The first of which is we have started a production safety and set protocol class, which has a manual. All the students are bound to the manual that are going to be shooting. They have to go through the class and learn the manual. Part of that class is understanding the difference between a permit and a location release. The permit gives us the opportunity to shoot in a park, shoot on a sidewalk, close down a street if we paid the appropriate fees. It does not give us the right to interfere with the business or residential dwellings in an area. The students have a separate form. It's a location release. Not only do they have to secure that from individual businesses or residences before they are allowed to use those properties or anything adjacent to those properties, there's also a requirement in the production manual that says you must notify every business and residence within a 500-foot radius that you will be shooting and when you will be shooting, and you must take care of parking 2 weeks in advance if that's an issue. So we're trying to make sure that we don't have a situation where we offend anybody. We'd really rather not ever have complaints about students, and I'm not going to sit here in front of you and tell you that that's not ever going to happen, but we are taking every precaution that we can to make sure from a production standpoint that everyone knows what's happening and that the students come in, do what they need to do, and they are gone when they're supposed to be gone.
Well, I don't doubt that as far as the notification process and the sticking within the boundaries. But my biggest concern is that, okay, so you got 10 people on the street that run businesses, and 5 of them don't care, and 5 of them don't want they can't get access to their business because their roads are closed and stuff like that. I mean, how can you deal with that is my biggest concern.
Well, we do have a section in here on neighborhood approval, similar to special event permits, so we'll have to have 70% approval of the residents in the affected area. And so for the students doing their location agreement, that would probably double as the neighborhood approval, but they would need 70%. But then also there's more information in here that says that access to the area needs to be maintained, a detour needs to be highlighted. So there are ways to ensure that people still have access, even though it's blocked temporarily.
Okay. Heidi?
That's what I was going to bring up, was the neighborhood approval. Is that the same thing as a location release, or is that, it looks kind of...
It sounds similar. This is what you just said. It sounded similar to neighborhood approval, so I would imagine if students were going around getting approval from residents, that would double as the neighborhood approval we would ask them to provide.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's safe to add, just because I'm certainly interested in transparency. We're talking about a program which at the moment has grown to 320 students.
Wow.
But we're also at a point where we're sort of cycling out previous expectations and creating new ones. So I don't imagine that you're going to have 10 shoots going on in Kent at the same time. That's just not where we are yet. Now, if we evolve to that in 4 or 5 years, obviously we're going to be back here and maybe having another conversation. But I think just being able to give them the opportunity to shoot in Kent as opposed to just shooting on the campus is going to be something that will be incredibly helpful in terms of, as was mentioned before in this conversation, the business aspect. This is not the show friends or show fun. This is the show business, and they need to make sure that they understand that there are obligations outside of their creative obligations. So again, we're very happy to have the opportunity to partner with the city on this, because I think in the grand scheme of things, there won't be a lot of this happening, but the stuff that is going to happen is going to be, from our end, handled as strictly as possible, and hopefully we'll have a chance to continue developing this. I don't think if this permit were to be approved, it's the end of this process. It's the beginning of an understanding and a longer-term commitment. So.
I do want to say one more question about the neighborhood approval. So when it says this, that bearing the signatures of affected residents of 70% 70% or more of the affected area. What does that mean? Does that mean 70% of the actual businesses or residential units or residential structures? Or are we talking about 5 people live in a house, you have to get, you can get, you
So
have to
it's-
get a 70% of those 5 people? That would
No.
be really challenging.
Similar to special event permits, we have neighborhood approval for road closures, so that's how we're going to do it, or that's how we proposed it for this procedure. But wherever the road closure begins and ends in that boundary, we do it by property lines. So, for instance, if I wanted to close a section of North Water Street that included Roger's house, I could get Roger's signature, but not the residents that live there, and that would still count. Or I could do the opposite and get a signature of someone that lived there and not Roger's signature, and that would still count. So as long as you have a signatory that either lives or owns the property, it would still work. You don't have to have both.
And you don't have to have everybody in this. Okay. Thank you.
John?
So, all that being said, what would you anticipate as the number of times that you'd want to close the street in a year?
I think that would be, quite frankly, that's going to be very low for the first couple of years of this. Honestly, where the program is right now, I don't anticipate more than a handful of times over the next 3 years, tops. I don't, honestly, if they asked for 5 road closures, I would be stunned in 3 years. We're at a place where we're still trying to get people over the idea outside of the program that this is 3 kids with a camera running around, because it's not. But at the same time, students are very brave until they're confronted with the fact that they're talking about 3 carloads worth of equipment, and they actually are going to have to do the paperwork, and they're actually going to have to get all of this set up, and then they're going to have to go do it come rain or come shine. So I don't think anybody's chomping at the bit to do this. I also think the processes that we've set in place, which were to create a faculty sign-off sheet where the student has to have that sheet signed off and present it to the city before they can even apply for a permit, are going to put a kibosh on a lot of that. So we're going to be watching this and making sure also that we consider the impact on the city when things happen. But again, I don't see this, again, we may have a different conversation 3, 4, 5 years from now, but I do not see this happening more than a handful of times for now, tops.
Gwen?
Yes, my question is just how you, like, in the film production definition is motion video production, television, videography, or web video, including video for distribution on the internet. Is that like YouTube video? I mean, there are a tremendous number of students that have assignments that they just kind of have to kind of go out and, you know.
Correct. This is a different situation size.
Yeah, I would say that there's a section here also for exemptions, and that exempts most of those situations, and specifically family videos, personal family videos, news media, also filming on private property. But in those cases, we're trying to identify what we can already include in our current permitting system. So if someone calls me today and says they wanted to use a portion of the sidewalk for a couple of hours, I would just give them a temporary use permit and tell them not to block the sidewalk if someone's walking there. So like stand out of the way, and then when they're gone, you can get back in the sidewalk and do your filming, and then that's it. So we would try to keep it like that as much as possible under the current system.
I just don't want to get in the business of permitting like self-expression or, you know, YouTube, just, you know, things like that. People are kind of doing this to kind of where the delineation is between production that requires a permit versus, you know, just people out just, you know, making Instagram videos or fulfilling assignments or a creative endeavor of some sort.
And we wouldn't regulate that. A lot of the videos you see now, for instance, someone asking students on the sidewalk questions and then posting it to YouTube, we wouldn't regulate that. That's exempt under this permitting. Yeah.
Roger?
Harrison, how do you perceive a way, you know, we are inundated with information constantly coming out of our city. and our university. How is there a way that we either can get these things out to the community quickly so that they know, whether it be on our message board out front that we share, or on our, you follow what I'm saying? Is there a way that, and I guess this goes beyond what we're talking about tonight, is there a way that we can get the word out? Because a lot of times, the confrontations that happen, it's because people are unaware.
Are you talking about notice of road closures?
Yeah, and stuff like that. Is there another, maybe that's something we need to look at. Maybe it's not germane to this conversation. I can remember, I know it's hard to believe, I have a face for radio, but I used to do TV work in different places and shoot films, and I can remember doing man on the street stuff, and people would go, what the heck's this all about? And why are you here? And those type of things. And I often wondered, how could we, is there a better way for us to so people kind of know that something's happening? They don't have to know specifically.
Yeah, as I talked about the manual earlier, the students have a responsibility to present in writing within a 500-foot radius of wherever they're shooting to everyone who has a business or a residence. They have to present in writing that they're planning on a shoot, the dates of the shoot, the times of the shoot, and we haven't finalized that yet because we were obviously waiting to see if this process would be successful, but they have an obligation, and it's in the manual, and it's the kind of thing you will fail a class for. We're being very straight up about this. These are all class-related activities. We have a sophomore level production, we have a digital cinematography and directing class, and we have a senior level production. All of those will require, if you're going to need a permit, you're also going to need to, with the location release, apprise residential and business owners, 500-foot radius, everybody, that you're planning on shooting and when and where you're doing it. Okay. So that's what we could do on our end anyway.
Thank you.
Further questions? Anyone from the audience wish to speak on this? Back to council.
Move to authorize.
Second.
With emergency? Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait, sorry. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
I had some discussion.
Very well.
Okay, I'm not surprised, John, but go ahead.
Yeah, I second this because I think it's a good idea, and it looks like it's going to be controlled and managed a little better. Because I know we had a thing on North Water Street a few months back, and prior to the day of execution, we had just a barrage of people trespassing on private residential property, opening up doors of apartments, walking in because they were in a commercial building and for some reason they thought it was, and that is what I don't want to see. And it looks like this particular organized film shoot is not going to allow that to happen, and they'll know their rules up front.
Okay. Can we vote now? Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, pass.
Community Development, Mr. Kuhar.
I'm going to yield my chairmanship to Gwen.
All right.
She loves it.
I do.
Thank you.
I do. All right. I can't guarantee there'll be discussions or audience, but no, I'm kidding. All right, community development. Our only topic is council expectations for the sale of North Water Street properties.
So we've effectively purchased through the DKC, land bank, those 3 parcels. And as Tom kind of said, well, now what do I do? I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things he could do, but we just don't want to send him off in a wrong direction. And so we're not asking for anything concrete per se out of you tonight. We realize, sort of the devil's always in the details, and we're not really have details yet. I mean, there are certain circumstances where you may be fine with doing X, but you might prefer Y. And so what I mean by that is, so we've got these 3 parcels, 2 of which have houses on them, and Tom has structures on them. And Tom has shared images of that at your table here to remind you what we own now. The question really sort of begs is, fundamentally, number one, if someone comes to us and says, I'd like to buy all 3 parcels, but I want to knock the structures down so I can build a larger structure, how do you feel about that? Like, you don't have to say I love it or hate it, but give us a sense for, well, if you do hate it and you say thanks but no thanks, that's good for us to know now. We won't even pursue that if someone comes along. Or likewise, if there's, I mean, it's kind of hard to think, are there certain uses you don't want to see Tom pursue? I know he's really anxious to go for certain things, but are there certain uses that may be allowed in the zoning, but as we said, part of your interest in purchasing this property was to be able to perhaps have some influence on what goes in there, and likewise who we're partnering with and what they're bringing to the table. So I realize this is kind of a pretty loose discussion compared to most of the things that we bring to you. So there's not really an action item from you other than if you give us some of your feedback and input. And I mean, Tom and I talked, and he had some good things that he thought of today even when we were talking, so I don't know if you want to share or just take the mic and run with it.
Sure. Well, in front of you is kind of the representations of the property and the summary of the property. And, just to give you a sense, if you go to the second page and look at the bottom where it describes the parcels and the size of the parcels, if all 3 were combined together, it would be 0.239 acres of an acre. And just to give you a sense of what that size is, if you look at 220, Bond 220 across the street here, that was actually built on a smaller parcel than that. So, this could potentially support a fairly large building. Purely from an economics development standpoint, from a budget and finance director standpoint, trying to generate income tax revenue, putting in that larger building, and if it was an office building with highly paid professionals, that would be optimal if you were just looking at it from a revenue production. There are others that would look at it as, can we recreate the history of North Water Street and perhaps have a fill-in building in between the 2 existing structures and have first floor commercial, whether they be hospitality or retail with second floor residential. Or do we do something that supports some of the other development that's going to take place on North Water Street? The mill is having some early success in talking to folks about leasing the office space that's in the mill. And, could we turn that center vacant parcel into a 2-story parking structure? You could put, approximately 36 cars, 18 on each level if you did that. Or to take it to another level, do you take down the 2 buildings and put in a 2-story parking structure that would hold 54 cars or something along those lines? So there's quite a gamut you can take a look at. I've already been approached by some people with various ideas, and we have not in any way, this has not even been in the paper yet, that these parcels are in the city's hands at this point, and I have done nothing to market it yet. So.
Hello.
Gwen.
Oh, God, I'm sorry. Where was I? I know, I was just, cat cafes and parking structures and dog parks. All right, I'm sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
Well, I'm an historic person, so I like that renovating them to fit the historic feel that section had. I mean, because a lot of other things are getting renovated that way down there also. So that's my choice. That Walter's Cafe, I mean, that has a lot of history. Kent was a very, and is a very musical town, and that had a lot of music in that, so I would like to keep that structure as it is and maybe renovate it something, and the other one too. The middle part, if you want to put a parking story there, that's fine, if it blends in.
Heidi?
Well, I would say that, the blending in is really key, but also developing something that's unique in appearance. I would hate to, I really don't want to encourage like major chains to move in like we've, so if something is unique or regional and they can make it fit in, I think arts, entertainment, or something that will support the arts and entertainment on that block, and definitely looking at creating jobs and or residences. So supporting the other development would be creating residences, also, getting more of a critical mass of activities on that in the Mill District would also support the other developments, so that people have a reason to walk that road, because they're going to encounter this or this, they'll have choices. And, I think that's a winning formula that we've done with the rest of the downtown. So I think it's going to have to be a case by case. Maybe you can write some kind of mission statement or, some kind of guidelines that you could bring back to council or something, and just, I don't want to narrow it so much that we can't visualize what somebody coming forward could do. But have you thought about writing something down so that is a guide?
No, because I wanted to hear your feedback here tonight. And we also, the Downtown Kent Corporation owns this, so we're not obligated to do a request for proposals or anything along those lines. And I really want to hear what people want to propose for these parcels once the word gets out that they're available and we're interested in developing them.
Yeah, one more thing. I wouldn't be opposed to a new structure, I don't think that we should save everything at all costs. I mean, sometimes something is just done. The building is just beyond the brink. But I think that, if it is a new structure, it really should be built to fit with the character.
Let's say it's a new structure that fills in the vacant lot, but not, and the other two structures remain. Is there any feeling on the potential height of that building? Because I'm sure I will be asked about that. So we typically have two-story buildings down most of North Water Street. What if someone proposes to fill that in with a four-story building?
Let me get Garrett and Mike, and then we can, I think, discuss it, because that might be part of questions or comments. Do you want to go ahead, Garrett?
Shop sucks.
I'm up.
Yeah.
I think that we've got a pretty good track record going in terms of ascertaining what people want to put in there, and when people come to us and say, this is what I'd like to do, and, I think the rest of the downtown kind of speaks to that. So I would think that you'd use your best judgment on what they want and have a pretty good idea. But I think the things that, I think what I'm hearing is, you want to maintain some of the character of the neighborhood with some of the old buildings, and but the river's there, so I mean, I hate the idea of a parking deck, and at the end of the day, we're not going to build a parking deck anyways, because it's $25,000 to $30,000 a space, and we're not going. The city's not going to build it. And there's not going to be a private developer that's going to come up and put a parking lot there. So I don't think we have to worry about that, but I would hate to see that riverfront area wasted on a parking deck like that. So I could see 4 stories, and you're starting to get more economic development down there with the coffee shops and the private enterprises like Jacobson's Woodworking. So I think along those lines, having something, people always talk about, I don't want to say senior residents, but non-student housing for professionals, whether they be young or old, seems to be something that people are talking about and that's lacking in Kent. And so, obviously to make that scalable and it's going to have to be more than, you're going to have more than 2 stories to make that economically feasible. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that, because if you get more foot traffic down there, it's just going to enhance the rest of the property down there. So I guess with all that said, I don't know what I said, other than you guys do a really good job of ascertaining what needs to come to council, and so that's when it looks good, bring it our way.
The only thing that I would say is we support residential, but let's not forget, we're going to have several units coming online soon.
Yeah.
West End actually has been taken over, so they are going to be having about 46 units. It's coming down from the 57, and then there's 16 above Hasawi's. And the current owner of the mill is talking about residential, although they are doing the master plan to formalize what they're going to do there. So I'm all for residential, but I'm a little cautious because I don't want to over-inventory us on beds.
Yeah.
We know what happens when you do that at the student end, because we've experienced that here. I'd rather not do that downtown either.
Are y'all done, Garrett?
That's it, thank you.
Mike?
How high can they build that building there? if they
60
were to?
feet. 60
Is it
feet.
60? So that
From
would
the
be-
Water Street level.
So that'd be comparable to the other ones that are proposed
Well,
on
it's
Franklin?
average at grade.
At grade?
So like basically it's the average, because it slopes, I think that slopes basically east to west from like front of the street to the back. So it would be the average, but the height would be 60 would be the average.
So they could put a lot of apartments in there, couldn't they?
Well, I mean, it's a very narrow vacant lot, unless the other two buildings were taken down, but it's a very, it's 59 feet
I'm
across.
sort of
actually.
concerned about the insides of those buildings too, because they're not in very good shape. So.
Structurally, they might be.
Roger.
So, okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm done. I was just curious.
Roger.
The whole point of clarification here, can I participate in this conversation?
No, you can't, sir, thank you.
That's what I wanted to
You're
know,
out.
that's all.
Jack?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Tracy on this, being a historian. I really like to try to preserve the buildings if possible. But Mike's also correct when, if something is beyond saving, then you really get into a situation which is too expensive to save. I have to say, my son lives in Worcester, and they've done a wonderful job of taking old buildings and repurposing them, but it's very expensive. And so, but I am also in favor of, if we can, saving the historic integrity of the neighborhood.
Tracy?
Yeah, I really like what Garrett suggested about senior housing, because we really need a lot of more senior housing. And I don't know if we can get senior housing in there or not, because people aren't interested anymore, right, in doing senior housing? They're really not interested?
It's all about the cost, the pro forma, they run the numbers and see, and seniors do want, typically, there are many that do want to live downtown, but some also want a garage. So we do talk to developers, we encourage that type of housing along with affordable housing, but the pro formas don't always work. They run the numbers, and if they can't put that many units there, the project doesn't come.
Tracy?
Yeah, like I say, I'm really interested, because we don't have a lot of senior housing in this town, and we're losing a lot of senior housing. I mean, we lost, when Silver Oaks went under, we lost a lot of senior housing. Is there some way, well, this is probably for another discussion, that the city can come in somehow and subsidize it, or something like that? Can the city build it, or I don't know. But that's probably another discussion some other time.
I mean, the two local incentives that we have to offer is, it is in a CRA zone, so it'll automatically benefit from that. And then secondly, you have the option as to what we sell these properties for. And, if you want to incentivize something, you can sell for a lower price than if you don't want to do that.
Really, for affordable senior housing, it's got to be a tax credit project, a low-income housing tax credit project. And so we did actually put $250,000 in Maplebrook 1, but the primary driver of that is if they can secure those tax credits. And that's a highly competitive process through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. It's not that we don't have developers that are interested in doing that, but it is a more complicated process than a private developer that's looking just to generate a set pro forma, or, generate a certain return on their investment based on a pro forma.
Any more, Tracy? Robin?
Yeah, what are the implications of the parking situation? How would, we're going to be any development, it's always probably the primary element. How is whatever we develop down there going to be able to meld into something that, that can actually not be a difficulty?
I believe, and there may be some argument, that the existing parking facilities that we have would support the first floor commercial aspect of anything that would take place down there, whether it be a hospitality or retail-oriented business, so a bar, restaurant, merchandise store. The one advantage this does have is someone could build a building on top of a pedestal and have parking underneath it for residentials that would be above the commercial floor. Now, obviously, again, if it's only in that center vacant lot, it's limited parking. I estimated, I'm not the engineer, but I took the liberty of looking at it myself, and, about 18 parking spaces could be accommodated underneath that center vacant lot. Where if the whole thing was redeveloped, then about 54 spaces could be put underneath there.
How many?
54. bear in mind, this is an economic development director that looked at the dimensions of the lot. I did look at our code though, Bridget, you'd be proud of me.
Does anyone else, any further from council? Oh, I'm sorry, Garret.
I just would, instead of calling it senior housing, I think what would be looking for down there would be active living housing, right?
Yeah.
In terms of people that are going to support and come out and shop and dine
I
and
think
take
it's very
advantage of
similar
this.
to the two buildings that Bridget referenced. It's market rate, would attract young professionals, empty nesters.
Right, right.
Um,
But you start getting into some of the tax savings and things like that, then you're looking at the senior
And then that
low-income
becomes more
housing, and
targeted.
that's not going to enhance it's not going to enhance the businesses within that area or the rest of downtown necessarily, in terms of spending.
Sure.
A mix though.
Did you wanna?
Yeah, if it's a mixed, like some of them for seniors, low-income seniors, and then it's mixed up. And they have an interest of coming downtown and shopping downtown. Right now, they can't, because where they're at, they can't access downtown, and they want to be downtown so that they can get out and walk around and take advantage of the businesses that are downtown.
Anyone else from council? Would anyone from the audience like to weigh in on what you'd like to see? Come right up to the mic. Name and address? Yes. Yes. Name and address, please. Oh, we're in the mic. We have to put it for the clerk, please. Thank you.
I'm Joe Cully. I live on 1550 South Lincoln Street. I'm an art educator, and I was just thinking, I just got a brainstorm over there as an artist, but I think it'd be neat, if you have a section that you want a specific need for, is to open up to like an architectural competition, because, you have different cities and architects can bring interest into this section, and Kent is a very, very unique landscape. You have the river going through, so if you have very specific wants and needs, and then you have the competition, conform to those needs, you could probably get some really interesting designs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Anyone else from the audience? Roosevelt guys? None of you? No? Nothing? All right. Okay.
Thank you very much.
No
for the
laser
feedback.
tag, all right.
Thanks.
That was your chance.
Don't call on me.
That's it, we don't need a motion or anything, so, thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finance Committee, Mr. DeLeone. I'm looking for my paper now. Here we go.
Nice job.
All right. Oh, this is the
Yeah,
proposed.
I don't know why he's sitting comfortably back
I
there.
know,
He-
I was waiting for him to start walking.
You think he knowed the drill by now.
He's
Has
only got 5 minutes for this.
Yeah,
That's never been a problem. No, yeah, right.
I've been to that parking space because there's no access behind the building.
It's all yours, yeah. We were hoping I was going to take it.
No, that's fine. That's, good evening, everyone. Basically, the city currently has a 1.16 mil general operating levy that will expire with the 2019 tax year. It's actually 2020 collection year, but we need to hopefully get this on the ballot ASAP to either make it as a renewal levy or as a replacement levy. And in my memo to the city manager, I tried to outline the two different scenarios, pluses and minuses, if you will. It's staff's opinion at this point in time that the renewal levy is probably the most likely to be accepted by the community. What we would like to do is to get this on the March 17th ballot. And we basically have 3 bites at the apple next year, but we will definitely want to get it in on the March one as a first opportunity for next year, that is. And it's an important revenue source for us. It's currently generating in excess of $300,000 annual. It's estimated that will go up a little bit further into the 325 range, probably, with the tax base increasing. But the process that we will need to follow for this is, with your authorization, is to request the county auditor to formally give us an estimate of what the revenue would be for renewal or replacement, whichever direction you choose to go. And then we would get that back from the county auditor, and then that would then lead us to formal legislation and ordinance to request that this be put on the ballot. We have until December 18th, I believe it is, to get all this done, to be timely with the County Board of Elections. And so that's kind of a hard deadline that we're up against at this point with this issue.
Questions? Heidi?
Is this the only levy that we have that goes right to our general fund? I mean, we have
The voted,
police
it's the only
levy.
voted levy that we have that goes to the general fund. We have unvoted as well. But, well,
Unvoted.
and then we have the West Side Fire as well.
Yeah, right, but I mean, this goes to the general fund for general expenses.
Correct.
So a lot of people think that just because they live in Kent, they think they're paying their taxes to Kent. This is fact that if you own property in Kent, you are paying a small portion of your taxes to the city.
That is correct.
Yeah. Even though if they work somewhere else, we don't get those taxes unless there's a reciprocity.
Right.
And, yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a relatively small amount for people, most of whom probably don't work in Kent, to help pay for our services, and we try to provide the best services that we can.
Well, in my memo, I tried to give the example that's kind of the standard use of assuming a $100,000 market value property and what the effect would be on the tax bill. And I believe the number that we have at this point is that it would be about $25.75 annual.
Right.
So that, as you said, is what we feel is a relatively nominal amount to 1.16
Small
mil. It's not a
investment.
particularly large levy. But it is important in terms of our overall annual budgeting process, without
Yeah.
question. So, there's, admittedly, I mean, with a replacement levy, the additional $160,000 that could be gained by that is tempting, but at the same time, we're trying to be sensitive to the community, and this really can legitimately be requested as a no increase over the current level of payments that the individuals have on this tax.
John?
So, people might not be aware of this, but isn't it true that the renewal levy is based on the appraisal value at the original time of the levy versus a replacement levy would be your new tax value and what would make it more expensive for you?
Yes, basically, that's correct.
So what
right.
you're projecting is more user-friendly for the pocketbook.
Absolutely. A replacement does, in fact, bring it up to the current, whatever the auditor has for that parcel as the fair market value. And so that would...
And what year did this levy originate?
1960 was the first passage of this particular levy. So clearly the city has had it in our budget for a long time. We would very much like to be able to retain it there.
So that would be a good reason to vote for a renewal.
Or a replacement.
I submit that it is, yes, and the fact that we have not asked for an increase in that period of time in the millage. So I think that, again, we've tried to be very prudent and very cautious about what we impose on the taxpayer.
Roger?
Yeah, I can't remember, when is the school going to be on the ballot? I know that.
March.
They're going to be in March also, so there'll be two ballot issues in March, and they will both be no increase in tax issues.
Correct.
If they're both renewals. I think that's important that the community hear that these are merely continuation of the support that both the schools are going to need, and obviously we want to continue this. So, but that's tricky sometimes because you do have two
Admittedly, that's true, and I understand that, that might be some concern, particularly to the schools, and.
Or to us.
Or to us as well. Well, certainly, yes. But at this point in time, that's really, again, our next best option. We ideally would have had it on this November. We didn't, and consequently, we need to go to the March ballot.
Further questions? Seeing none, anybody in the audience? Back to council.
Move to approve with emergency.
What I'm needing at this point in time is authorization, which would be then presented to you at council meeting as more formal resolution, but authorization for that resolution to request of the county auditor an estimate for this. That's step one. Then after we get that back from the county auditor, they will come back with a resolution for, or ordinance for the actual placement on the ballot.
Yeah, that's what my motion was.
That's what
I just
my
wanted to be clear.
second-
I thought that's what I heard, but I just wanted to be sure that we had it right.
Just didn't read between the lines.
You did.
And Roger seconded that, so further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. You're still up, still? Oh, yeah.
He has one more.
I get one more at bat.
It took 7 minutes.
Pardon me? I'll be quick. I request your authorization for budget amendments as I've outlined in my September 25th memo to the city manager. I hoped that we might push this off until November, but the nature of these particular ones kind of required us to take action at this time. So unfortunately, we sometimes have to do it every month.
Questions from council? Seeing none, to the audience?
Moved, audience?
Yeah. I go to the audience, Frank. Back to council?
Move to approve with emergency.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
That one, you made up for it there.
We'd be done.
I don't usually vote
We're done for the night.
for the renewal.
Well, you should give this.
Then you guys need signatures?
Any questions? You guys have any questions about what went on?
It's okay.
You're the boss.